It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Thank God that game is over. That was an absolute ass whooping. What a horrible way to start the NLCS. The Mets get beaten from pillar to post. They pitched like crap. They hit like crap. Their defense was awful. Their base running was bad. The managing was suspect. I mean, where the hell do you want to start with that slop? I guess I'll start with a positive. Here's the positive. All right, I do have a positive in an absolute ass-whooping 9-0 loss to the LA Dodgers. The positive is we did not have our balls ripped off of us. You know, it does seem like when the Mets lose games, whether it's during the regular season or the two losses they've had in the postseason, they're absolutely awful losses. Let's not forget, when they lost the one game to the Philadelphia Phillies in Philadelphia, they had a 3-0 lead in the sixth inning. They had a lead in the eighth inning. They dramatically came back in the ninth inning, and they lost on a walk-off. It was an absolute ball ripped off kind of L. You look at game 2 against the Brewers, similar thing. They had a lead in the eighth inning. It felt like a golden opportunity that was missed. This is the first time in a couple of weeks where the Mets just got their ass kicked. It was just an awful, awful night. And I get if you sat there for the full 3 hours starting to have these bad visions because the Dodgers are a damn good team. Look, there's a reason they have the best record in baseball. I mean, they won 98 games. I feel like maybe we disrespect them because they win a lot of games every year and they always seem to come up small in the postseason. Maybe we disrespect them because we look at the names in the rotation and the names in the bullpen and say, they're not that good. But this was a sobering kind of game because you look at this lineup, you look at the way Jack Flaherty threw the ball today, and the Dodgers are going to be a tough cookie. I'm not giving up. I'm not saying the series is over. But when you sit there for 3 hours and you get your face basically just thrown into the toilet for 3 hours, it's a little tough. It's also tough with who's explaining the game. Look, Joe Davis is not a bad announcer, and Joe Davis did nothing wrong. But I have seen so much of Joe Davis kiss the Dodger ass because he's the Dodger voice that no matter what he says, it feels like he's mocking us, even if he's done nothing wrong. But that's the sounds of someone, myself, and probably 90% of the listeners right now, who are just bitter that we got our ass kicked. So let's break this thing down. Let's start right from the beginning. If you are going to bitch about Carlos Mendoza's decision to start Kodai Senga, all I ask, as someone who disagreed with the move, as someone who did 2 Ricos in a row, explaining why I wouldn't start Kodai Senga in game 1, so I raised my hand as somebody that didn't love the move. But if you're going to bitch about it, if you're going to write emails bitching about it, if you're going to tweet about it, I just hope you said something in the last 48 hours. That's all I ask. I was on my Mets text chat, and one of the guys said, this is going to be the talking point. How do you start Kodai Senga? The guy's barely pitched this season. He's thrown 7 1/3 innings. I got a text message from a friend of mine who's a Yankee fan who right away says, I don't understand this with Senga. What I say to you is, where were you the last 2 days? I don't want to hear this Monday morning quarterbacking bull crap. If you had an issue with it, open your mouth. Now, maybe you did. I can't speak for everybody. I know I had an issue with it, but there were many reasons besides Kodai Senga not being able to throw a strike that cost them this game. Kodai Senga giving up 2 runs in the first inning, which sucked and was awful, was not the entire game. There were 2 other things that could have happened that changed things. And let me start with criticism number 1 of Carlos Mendoza, because I don't want to waste your time breaking down if they should have started Senga or not. I already made my case. If you listen to the 2 Ricos we did leading up to this series, I gave all my reasons for why I wouldn't have started him in game 1. So I'm not relitigating that right now. If you care about why I had that opinion, go back and listen to last night's Rico or the Rico before that. I wouldn't have started him in game 1. I have a quote-unquote ace in Sean Manaea. I would have thrown him right out of the gate in game one. I also had other reasons. Manaea is better on regular rest. I'd rather use this bullpenish game in a game two where we have an off day the next day. But that's all I'll say about that. One Senga is clearly off. He walks 3 consecutive hitters after he got Ohtani out to start the game and wasn't particularly close in walking them. Mookie Betts was on 4 pitches. Teoscar Hernandez was on 4 pitches. Will Smith made very good. I thought had a sacrifice fly, but for whatever reason, Mookie Betts didn't try to score. Tyrone Taylor also had a very weird kind of way of catching that ball, almost like he was allowing Mookie Betts to score. But then he gives up the base hit to Max Muncy, which is an absolute killer when you're this close to escaping a first inning jam, which I admit, I thought Senga was going to get out of it. As shaky as he was in walking those 3 guys, and as lucky as he was that Will Smith didn't get a sacrifice fly, I remember Kodai Senga's Met debut, and I'm not talking about in the regular season, in spring training. He faced the St. Louis Cardinals, and he walked the bases loaded to start it, and somehow he got out of it. And we've seen that a lot from Kodai Senga when he pitched a year ago. So I had that memory in my head. Yes, I had a spring training game in my head from freaking 2 years ago. But I did. And I thought, wow, this guy's going to somehow escape this. And it's going to put Mendy in a tough spot because he's looked so shaky in the first inning. He's not a normal starter where you're looking for him to settle down and pitch 5 or 6 innings. You're talking about a guy that in the best case scenario is going 2 or 3 innings. So I think you've got to manage differently. And then obviously falls behind Max Muncy, throws a freaking cutter right down the middle. Muncy hits the crap out of it in center field, and that's always the worst. When you're this close to getting out of a jam, and then you give them 2 runs. But right then and there, and this was one mistake. Mendy made a few of them today we'll get into, but one mistake I hated right off the top. Get him out of the game. Get him out of the game. Because A, he was way off in the first inning. Mendoza admitted it 2 innings later during those dopey interviews with the manager. That one was actually interesting because Mendoza said he didn't have it. So he's admitting he didn't have it. He's admitting, yeah, you could see right as it left his hand. He did not have it. Well, hold on a second. If you're admitting that and you knew he didn't have it, which we all knew too, why is he pitching a second inning? Why? Explain that one to me. And you can't tell me, well, I got to get innings out of my starter. He's not giving you innings. You know that going in. He's essentially an opener. So I thought that was a big mistake right out the gate. Like, it is obvious that this is not the best of Kodai Senga. So at 2-0, the game is not over. At least we think you'll be able to hit Jack Flaherty. We assume the Mets will show a pulse offensively. Get him out of the game. And the beauty of getting him out of the game at 2-0 is you give David Peterson almost a clean opportunity in a close game. That didn't happen. He allows him to start the second inning. Okay, I disagree. I disagree vehemently that you let him start the second inning. And he walks Gavin Lux on 5 pitches. So at that point, do you want to get him out of the game? At that point, are you not thinking to yourself, wow, this guy's walked 4 of the first 8 hitters. Maybe I should get him out. And I think Mendy's words that he used in the middle of this game is actually what pissed me off the most. Because he said he didn't have it. So it's not like we're even arguing. You know he didn't have it, then get him out of the game. Why is he in the game? Every run should matter. And I don't want to hear about how many outs you got to get. When you commit to starting Kodai Senga in the postseason, which the Mets already did, obviously, in Game 1 against Philadelphia, then you know going in, you're going to need 21 outs out of your bullpen, maybe 24 outs out of your bullpen. You know that. So I thought Mendy made a couple of really, really big mistakes. Going to Reed Garrett, I don't have a problem with that because I think once you're in the middle of an inning, you're going to use a traditional reliever, which I understand. You're going to want to give David Peterson a clean inning, even though when he went to David Peterson, he went to him with a runner on base and 2 outs. but it felt like when he went to David Peterson, not that it was too late, because at 3-0, it would be Monday morning quarterbacking to think, wow, they're not going to be able to score a run. Because the Mets, while they look lifeless offensively for periods of time, they usually at some point, whether it's the 8th inning like it was game 1 against the Phillies, or it's the 6th inning like it was in game 4 against the Phillies, eventually they start hitting. So I thought, hey, eventually they'll start hitting. But at 3-0, that's when you go to David Peterson. And Mendy even says, I want to give this offense a chance. Well, you use David Peterson for 2 1/3 innings. He wasn't great either, by the way. I mean, let's blame him a little bit, because after he got that strikeout in the 3rd inning, gives up the leadoff hit ahead of the count to Kike Hernandez, who I can't stand. The Dodgers laying down bunts all over the place. He's ahead of Tommy Edman 1-2. And that's the thing the Mets can't have happen. Their pitching cannot allow the bottom of the order and the non-Ohtani, Freeman, and Betzes of the world to kill them. And in this game, they did. Because Kike Hernandez had 2 hits. You had the leadoff walk to the 8th hitter, Gavin Lux, by Kodai Senga. You had Tommy Edman behind in the count coming through with an RBI single that put them up 4-0. Can't happen. Can't let these guys beat you. If you let them beat you, you're going to lose. I mean, that's the bottom line. But then David Peterson gives up that scorching double to Shohei Ohtani. By the way, it's a scorching double. Remember the ball that was off the wall? This is a thing that I'm the only one who cares about. They actually scored a single because I guess they assumed that Starling Marte, who was fielding it right off the wall and then dropped it, was going to be able to hold Ohtani to a single. Now, Fox, they don't show us. They don't show us if Ohtani was stopping, if Marte played that clean. Does Edman not score from first? Does Ohtani stop at first? We have no idea, but that was a part of the bad defense we're talking about. Starling Marte possibly holds Edman at third. Possibly they get Edman at the plate. Possibly Ohtani doesn't go to second. But Marte drops the baseball in right field after he fields it off the wall. So technically, it wasn't an RBI double, though it felt like one. It was just a booming single off the fence. Then Freddie Freeman comes through with a bloop RBI single. And if you hung in there for the 9 innings, it was like just an execution for the last hour and a half. As much as this team has come back, you kind of knew it wasn't happening here. The offense, as I mentioned, has been quiet for periods of time a lot. That's not new. That's not an original thing. But usually, the pitching keeps him in the game. Like we saw in game 1 against Philadelphia. The last time they pulled this Kodai Senga into the bullpen action. The Met pitching held those Philly bats to 1 run. So when they finally got Zach Wheeler out of the game, it's a 1-0 game in the 8th inning, and boom, the bats explode. We've seen that a lot. Go back to game 161 against Atlanta. Same thing. Bullpen sort of keeps them in the game. They're down 3-0. They can't do anything against Spencer Schwellenbach. And then, boom, they explode in the 8th and 9th inning. The pitching today, led by Senga, continued by David Peterson, and then finally capped off late, if you care, by Jose Budo, gave them absolutely no shot to come back in this game. Because while the Mets have made great comebacks, when you're down 6-0 after 4 innings, the likelihood of coming back is nil. Couple of things on the pitching, and then I'll rip the offense to shreds. Really, the decision by Carlos Mendoza. So I hated keeping Senga for the 2nd inning. I've made that clear. I hated when Senga issues the leadoff walk, keeping him in the game. I hated that. His decision to go to Reed Garrett, I mean, that's the reliever you do go to in that spot. He's in the circle of trust. And at that point in the game, you're trying to keep the game close. And Reed Garrett did a pretty damn good job. He really did. He got out of the 2nd inning by getting Mookie to line out the 2nd. He had back-to-back strikeouts in the 3rd inning. Reed Garrett was fine. David Peterson obviously sucked. They make the decision in the 6th inning, which I think was the right time to basically white flag the game and go to Dana Young. Dana Young on the roster as opposed to Adam Ottavino, whatever. They both have mop-up roles. Let's be perfectly honest. Like, one of them was going to be on the roster. The other one was going off for Jeff McNeil. We talked about that a few days ago. You could take your freaking pick on the guy you want on the roster because neither of those guys are pitching in close games as you saw in this one. So I was debating, once David Peterson gave up the 3 runs in the 4th inning, I was thinking, all right, do you take him out right then and there? Thinking to yourself, you know what? This game's over. I think the problem, you run into a few problems on why I was okay with Mendy allowing one more inning out of David Peterson. Number one, they don't have a lot of mop-up guys in their bullpen. So if you go to Danny Young, to me, the only other guy I would want to go to is Tyler McGill. Those guys better get the final few outs, which you could pull off. Tyler McGill's a starting pitcher. The other thing is, are you really wanting to give up a game in the bottom of the 5th inning? It is 6-0, but don't you want to give yourself like that 6th inning to see, hey, maybe they score 2-3 runs and they get back in this game? So I was good with Mendy giving Peterson another inning, because then the other factor is, if you pull David Peterson out, thinking, all right, game's over, I'll have McGill eat up the last few innings, when is David Peterson going to be available as compared to when is he going to be available by pitching that extra inning? And the answer is, it probably doesn't make much of a difference. He's not pitching in game 2. There's an off day going into game 3. And I'm going to assume that he'll be available to pitch out of the bullpen in game 3 on 2 days rest. That's your throw day. So I don't think taking him out in the 5th or 6th would have made a big difference. Okay, I get it. He pitches the 5th inning. The Mets still don't score any freaking runs in the 6th inning. Let me go to Danny Young to eat some innings up. I'm thinking when Danny Young comes in, you know what? Just go pitch the last 3 innings. Honestly, this game's freaking over. Unless the Mets score runs and somehow get back into this game, I want Danny Young just finishing this game up. Again, Fox is so bad with their broadcast at times. They leave you oblivious. They don't kind of show you who's warming up in the bullpen. They don't show you things like that. So when Mendy came out in the 7th after the walk to Teoscar, I'm thinking to myself, who's he going to? So during that entire commercial break, I'm looking down, and if they showed Jose Butto coming in, I apologize. I was trying to also watch the Giants to some degree. So maybe they did show him briefly. I'm looking down at my scorecard, and I'm thinking, there's only one option, Tyler McGill. To me, that's only one option, because everybody else in this bullpen on some level is in that trust tree, that circle of trust. It's not a reliable circle of trust. It's almost a circle of trust by default. But Jose Butto, despite struggling his last 2 performances, and certainly maybe not us trusting him as much, is certainly still a guy, in my opinion, who I would want on the mound in a close game over Tyler McGill. Call me crazy. So McGill was the logical guy to come in and eat those outs. And when I see Butto coming in, I'm thinking, Mendy, you're going to waste Jose Butto in a game like this? Because we know how Butto doesn't pitch back-to-back days. So once he comes into the game and finishes up the 7th and then gets through a relatively long 8th inning, and by get through, he didn't, because he gave up that bases-clearing double to Mookie Betts, helped out by awful defense by Pete Alonso. Again, the defense sucked in this game, if I haven't made that clear. You've basically burned Jose Butto. So thinking ahead to game 2, the Mets are not going to have David Peterson available. They're not going to have Jose Butto available. You've already eliminated 2 guys who you trust to some degree. They're both gone. Edwin Diaz, obviously. I think Reed Garrett will be available on a back-to-back. Ryan Stanek, Phil Maton, and then Tyler McGill. You are putting a lot of pressure on Sean Manaea to have to go deep into this game. I wouldn't have gone to Butto in this one. I would have gone to McGill. I would have had him eat up the rest of these innings, and Butto would have been an available arm in game 2, and now he's not. So I don't like that move either. And that's one of those moves that really has no impact on game 1, because I think we all admit the game was over. It's more, how does this impact game 2? And I think it negatively impacts it. Butto has not pitched well recently. I understand that. Do you not trust him more than Tyler McGill? I do, out of the bullpen, in a role that Tyler McGill's not that used to. Last time we saw Tyler McGill out of the bullpen, he was giving up the game to the Philadelphia Phillies in game 2. So that was the other mistake by Carlos Mendoza. But now let's rip the offense. Because, they didn't score a freaking run. They got 3 hit by Jack Flaherty and 2 arms in the Dodger bullpen. They have helped write a script in which the Dodgers now are an inning away from a consecutive scoreless streak not seen since the mid-'60s and the Baltimore Orioles. The Padres deserve a lot of blame, but the New York Mets contributed to that big time today. This offense, which, yes, will completely disappear for periods of time, but eventually shows up, did not show up. 1, 2, 3 in the first inning, they looked overwhelmed by Jack Flaherty. 1, 2, 3 in the second inning, they looked even more overwhelmed by Jack Flaherty, with Pete Alonso striking out, Starling Marte taking a ball right down the middle, and Jesse Winker meekly grounding out. They go down 1, 2, 3 in the third inning. They're getting perfected by Jack Flaherty, who was awful in his previous start. Then you get to a key opportunity, which was the fourth inning. You're down 3-0, so you're still in this game, and Francisco Lindor draws a leadoff walk. Mark Vientos, and I think it was 1-0, swings at it, just flails at an off-speed pitch out of the strike zone, which changed the entire at-bat. Jack Flaherty came out in the fourth inning, and he was not throwing strikes consistently. And Mark Vientos was way too aggressive, ends up striking out looking on a fastball that, yes, Mark, hit the inside corner. Then you get the same issue with Brandon Nimmo, where Flaherty falls behind 2-0. Nimmo gets a pitch to hit, foul pops it up. Great at-bat by Pete Alonso, and he's had a lot of those, to set up the tying run at the plate for Starling Marte. There were 2 moments in this game, only 2. That just shows you what kind of ass-whooping this was. There were only 2 moments in this game in which my stomach was churning like a real playoff game, like a big moment where you can feel the momentum in this game and everything can change. Early with Max Muncy, when it looked like Kodai Senga was going to escape that first inning, bases loaded, 1 out, the pop up the center, and then eventually gives up the hit to Muncy. And then when Marte came up as the tying run. Because knowing the Met Magic, knowing that Flaherty was falling behind hitters and had just issued a big walk to Pete Alonso, this was a moment. This was a moment where they could turn this Jack Flaherty start, where they could turn this game. 3-0 can very quickly become 3-2. You find the alley. Could possibly tie the game. And off the bat, second pitch from Jack, Marte hits one to right field that for like a tiny, itsy-bitsy split second, you thought, could this get out? Could this get to the wall? And unfortunately, Mookie Betts tracks it down, and the inning ends. And then 5 minutes later, the Dodgers break the whole freaking game open, because that was the fourth inning where they got the base hit by Tommy Edman, the booming hit off the fence by Shohei Ohtani, the little blooper by Freddie Freeman, and it just put us out of our misery. But there was one more tiny itsy-bitsy moment where the Mets made you think, maybe we got some magic. And this was the moment. I mean, we already knew the Mets were losing this game, but this was the definitive, okay, this is not our freaking night. Most of it self-inflicted. Jesse Winker, to his credit, behind in the count 0-2, base hit off Jack Flaherty. We talked about it on the Rico the other night. Winker has great career numbers against Jack, needed to be in the lineup, was in the lineup, gets an 0-2 base hit. It's 6-0, but in the fifth inning, my thought is, you know what? Get a couple of guys on base, run into a 3-run home run. Let's make this thing interesting. Because even in a game that you're likely not going to come back in, there are benefits to keeping this game close and making the Dodgers sweat. Make them use relievers. Make them have to show you a lot of the arms that you're going to have to see throughout a best-of-7 series. So coming back isn't just to come back and win, because, yes, we want to see our team win, but come back and make Dave Roberts show us a lot of arms in his bullpen. So Jesse Winker, good job, pal. Behind in the count 0-2, base hit to right field. Jose Iglesias, who has not hit a lot in this postseason, very quietly has not hit a lot in this postseason. He did have that big hit in Game 3, so we remember that, but he hasn't hit a lot. Has a really good battle with Jack and dumps one in the left center field. And at that moment, I'm like, here we go. First and third, nobody out. You got Taylor and Alvarez coming up. As long as no one bounces into a double play, Lindor's going to come up. All right, we got something going on here. And then when I look up, and this is one of the very rare times that I want to say something bad about Jesse Winker, because Jesse Winker's been a fine Met. He's gone from the guy we hated in Cincinnati, hated in Washington. He became our douche. That's what I say. He's our lovable douche, Jesse Winker. And I don't know what the hell he's thinking in a 6-0 game, but he stops between second and third. I don't know what he's doing. And he gets in a rundown. He's thrown out easily, and you just knew this inning is dead on arrival because of that kind of boneheaded base running by Jesse Winker in the 5th inning. Can't happen. Can't give up base hits ahead in the count to the bottom of the order like they did Tommy Edman, like they did KK Hernandez. Can't happen. Can't play crappy defense like Starling Marte dropping balls that he fielded off the right field fence or Pete Alonso throwing lollipops to second base. Can't happen. And the other thing that can't happen is when you're putting a rally together against the guy that you did nothing against in the first 4 innings of this game, didn't have a hit against. You can't run yourself out of an inning. That was inexcusable, brain fart, crap baseball by Jesse Winker. And then think about where that inning goes after that. Your brain is telling you first and third, nobody out, 6-0, but hey, first and third, nobody out. Now there's a runner on first and 1 out, and both Tyrone Taylor and Francisco Alvarez swing at the first freaking pitches and fly out to the outfield. Good night, Irene. That's it. Can't happen. The Mets are not good enough to have that happen. So when we talk about the pitching sucked, the defense sucked, the offense sucked, the base running sucked, the manager's decision sucked, like that's not hyperbole. Like literally everything and every aspect one can have on a baseball team sucked in this game. Oh, you know what? I got one positive. I give you one aspect that didn't completely suck. The LA Dodgers attempted 1 steal against the Mets, who have struggled big time all year, shutting down a run game, and the immortal Shohei Ohtani overslid second base to end the 2nd inning. So the Dodgers were 0 for 1 trying to steal a base. That's the one positive. But everything else was awful, was abysmal, was pathetic. And look, here's the other good thing is it's one game. And I know that. It's one game. And I think it was John Smoltz who said this. And I kind of agree with him, kind of to a slight degree. A best of 7 series is a very long series. It is a very different mindset than a best of 5. In a best of 5, every game feels 10 times bigger because you don't have much of a margin for error. In a best of 7, you do. You look through Met history, we got a lot of examples of it. Losing game 1 doesn't guarantee you a loss, and winning game 1 doesn't guarantee you a win. Like I think back just in my lifetime to game 1 of the NLCS in 2006. Mets beat the Cardinals. What the hell did that do? They lost game 2. They ended up coming back to Shea Stadium down 3-2, won game 6, lost game 7. Like it happens. It happens. But I did agree that this game in particular probably was a little bit, just a tiny bit more important for the Dodgers because of the fact that the Mets are throwing out their best starting pitcher in game 2. The Mets were throwing out, and it's basically a bullpen game in game 1. So I kind of understand that, but now the pressure's on in game 2. Look, losing the first 2 games of a series doesn't ensure that you're going to lose a series. Though if you look at Met history, the only time they've ever lost the first 2 games of a best of 7 series and then came back and won it was the 1986 World Series. That's it. When they lost game 1 and game 2 at home. But you think back to all the other best of 7s in Met history. 1969, they lost game 1 in Baltimore, came back and won 4 straight. By the way, we'd all sign for that right now. 1973, they lost game 1, but came back, won game 2. Won 2 out of 3 at Shea, had a 3-2 lead going back to Oakland, lost game 6, lost game 7. In 86 in the NLCS, they lost game 1. That's right. They lost game 1 of that too. Came back and won game 2. Lost game 1, won game 2, won game 3, lost game 4, won game 5 and 6. And by the way, isn't it crazy that in 1986, the Mets had to be on the road in Houston? Isn't that freaking crazy? Back in the day, they used to switch off by divisions, which is stupid. Same thing in 88. 1988, Mets have a better record. They got to open in LA, where they won game 1, lost game 2, won game 3, lost game 4, game 5, Mike Scioscia game, won game 6 in LA, lost game 7. 99, they lost the first 3, as we know, both in Atlanta. Then at Shea, came back, forced the game 6, lost that brutal game. 2000 against the Cardinals, won game 1, lost game 2, won the next 3 at Shea Stadium. 2000 World Series, I don't want to talk about that. I think we all know what happened. 06, like I mentioned, won game 1 at Shea, lost game 2, lost game 3, won game 4, lost game 5, won game 6. Beltran's still looking. They lost game 7. 2015, nice clean sweep. So the moral of that story is there is no moral. It's a long-ass series. That's the moral of that story. But they've got to play better. That's the simple thing. They've got to play better. This offense has to hit. They got completely shut down. This pitching needs to be better. The manager needs to be smarter. Their defense needs to be crisper. Their base running can't be stupid like we saw with Jesse Winker. They just got to be better. The one thing I do feel good about, not good, the one thing I don't feel awful about is that it'll be easier to go to sleep tonight than if they blew a lead in the 9th inning. Than it was after they lost game 2. Than it was after they lost game 2 against the Phillies. Those were brutal freaking playoff losses. And this was just an ass whooping. And it's a reminder, a sobering reminder that the LA Dodgers are very good. And for all the talk we've had over the last couple of days, it is a reminder that they are freaking loaded. And we can't take this opponent for granted. Now, let's read some of your emails. I'm sure they'll be very positive. Actually, you want me to start with a positive one? Let's start with a positive one. Positive Tommy. The Mets have been here before. They are tough. They are battle-tested. Stay positive. This game only counts as one. Get out of LA with a split. By the way, all that's completely true. I mean, they have been here before in terms of having to bounce back. Win game 2, and this would be a major success going back to Citi Field. The only thing that is new for this team is while they've responded to a lot of bad, brutal losses, this is the first time during this playoff run they are behind in a series. They've been ahead of every series. They were up 1-0 on Milwaukee before it got tied and won game 3. They were up 1-0 on Philly before it got tied and they won game 3 and game 4. They certainly responded to those 2 bad losses. Game 2 against Milwaukee, game 2 against Philadelphia. But this is an original place to be of trailing in a series. Will writes, love the show and the podcast. I appreciate that. Just wanted to say that I felt that the Mets celebrated way too hard when they beat the Phillies. Players crying and taking pictures with their families and on as if they won it all. Lindor said the work isn't done, but I was at game 4, and this was my thought as I watched them lose their shit. And Nimmo saying OMG while looking up at the sky as if they completed all they were set out to accomplish. Tonight, they look like they didn't want to play any more baseball. They look like they have nothing left. Well, first of all, I hope they have something left. I think we would all be very disappointed if this ends in a 4-game sweep or a listless loss to LA. But I disagree. I think it's okay to celebrate. I do. I think the accomplishment of winning that series, of celebrating at home, which the fans hadn't been able to do since 2000, I think it's okay to celebrate. I think every team celebrates. I saw the LA Dodgers celebrate when they won their division series against San Diego. We saw the Yankees celebrate with a crazy champagne ceremony. Like, that's what teams do. The crying, look, I had a tear. Now, I had a tear And I've seen the Mets get to the NLCS before. I've seen them lose in the NLCS before. Being in the National League Championship Series is not new for most Met fans. They were there 9 years ago. But I think sometimes when you're on a special ride, you celebrate. And I'll tell you the other reason why I don't buy that. You think about Met history. When the Mets beat the Diamondbacks in 1999 on a walk-off home run by Todd Pratt, they acted like they won the World Series. And they did lose the next round, but they came back from 3-0 down. Same thing in 2000 when they beat the Giants on a Bobby Jones one-hitter. So when you celebrate and you get excited, that doesn't mean that things are going to go badly. If things go badly in this series, it won't be because they celebrated. It'd be because they don't play well and the Dodgers are really good. Dallas writes, brutal. People were sounding off immediately about Senga starting being the worst decision ever. The reality is who started was completely irrelevant. The Mets were completely and utterly uncompetitive. They pitched terribly, they fielded terribly, they hit terribly, and despite having almost no one on base, managed to run the bases terribly. The worst kind of loss. They better wake up tomorrow. My only problem with bitching about the Senga decision, and this is coming from a guy who bitched about the Senga decision, is it feels very Monday morning quarterback-y. It didn't feel like it was a huge controversy to most Met fans. We debated it about starting him in game 1 or starting him in game 2 or maybe even pushing him back further. But this didn't feel like one of those decisions that was hated from the beginning, and that seems a little disingenuous. Matt writes, optimistic after game 1 loss. All right, that's going to make us feel good, right? Evan and Pete, even though the team looked completely lifeless tonight, I'm not too worried. Senga Peterson pitching game 1 might have actually been the right move. Hear me out. Manaea and Sevy will now be opposed by the Dodgers bullpen and a shaky Walker Buehler in game 2, 3, 6, and 7, which gives us a clear pitching advantage on paper. It feels like the Stearns and Mendoza optimized the rotation for better matchups instead of just throwing our best pitchers in order starting from game 1. Additionally, pitching Senga in game 1 allows him to pitch at home in game 5, where he was significantly better in 2023 than on the road. Thanks for being the voice of Met fans. Thank you, Matt. I think you have to throw your best pitcher out in game 1. So I don't think they literally made those decisions based on the other pitching matchups. I don't think that's the right way to manage. I don't think you sit there looking at, well, who's Dave Roberts going to pitch? The truth is the Dodgers starting pitching has a lot of questions. We saw what it was in the San Diego series. Jack Flaherty wasn't very good, yet the Mets couldn't hit him in game 1. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who the Mets will see later in this series, again, two completely different pitchers like Jack Flaherty was. Terrible in his first start, amazing in a winner-take-all game 5. Walker Buehler, if memory serves correct, got off to a terrible start in his start and then settled in a little bit. And then a bullpen game is a complete enigma. Joshua writes, Kodai Senga, what a mistake. I know you were high on starting Manaea today, and I wholeheartedly agreed with you. For some reason, David Stearns and Mendy are fighting the fact that the great Sean Manaea is our true ace. Beyond that, our bats were lifeless today. Iglesias has been pressing the entire postseason. Maybe we get Jeff McNeil in there tomorrow. Winker with an unacceptable base running mistake, followed up by 2 at-bats that end on the first pitch. What a joke. By the way, are we officially worried about David Peterson out of the bullpen now? Surely it couldn't continue to go as smooth as it has against this Dodger lineup. I'm worried that we will be watching back-to-back Met and Jet losses tomorrow. Oh, my God. And that would be a horrendous 24 hours if we've got Met game 1 loss already in the books, a game 2 loss in the middle of the day, followed by a Jet loss to the Buffalo Bills on Monday night. I mean, it may happen. If I had to guess right now, probably is. But game 2 for this Met team is such a must. It's such a must. I think playing from behind against this Dodger team, especially with Yamamoto, who looked so good in game 5. And I know, like we talked about, he was up and down, Flaherty was up and down, but playing from behind and really putting yourself in a spot coming back to City where you have to win the next 2 games. I know the Mets have responded to everything, but game 2 is such a must, especially with how well Sean Manaea has played. Negative Dan. Well, all those pull the rabbit out of your ass wins were great, But now you just got a firsthand view of what happens when your offense takes the first 7+ innings off each game and your pitching doesn't throw their balls off like they have been for the past 2 weeks, especially going against a lineup like this that includes 3 MVPs. All those 1-0, 2-0 games that you carried into the late innings now turns into 6-0 by the 5th, and it becomes borderline impossible to pull that OMG miracle crap, which basically got them to where they are right now. If this offense doesn't start showing up early, not only will this series be over before you can blink, but it's going to be a complete outclassing, which brings me to the Senga situation. I can understand why they put him out there. Him going out here for a second is a different story, but that has to be the last time we see him this year. This isn't a cute little story in house money anymore. This is a real big boy baseball against a big boy team in a big boy spot, and it's time to treat it as such. Add to the fact that they're trailing in a playoff series for the first time now. There should be no more effing around with a guy who literally hasn't pitched the entire year when you're now 4 wins away from making a World Series. This is David Peterson's spot now, even after getting a little roughed up tonight, and deservedly so, which if you told April Negative Dan he'd be saying that in the NLCS, I would have given myself an intervention for smoking the same stuff Positive Tommy is on. So he brings up a very interesting point that I do want to think about and maybe sleep on. David Peterson earned a spot in the playoff rotation. I think we all agree with that. If you go back to late September, middle of September, I don't think there was any question if you could line up the rotation the way you wanted, David Peterson was in it without a shadow of a doubt. And he really only lost a rotation spot for things that had nothing to do with him. The days didn't line up for him when the postseason began. Remember, he pitched that incredibly big Sunday game against Milwaukee, which was essentially a playoff game. They then use him out of the bullpen because they needed him in game 3, and that was on short rest. So he wasn't in line to start any of those Milwaukee games. Then you get the news that Kodai Senga is ready to come back, and David Peterson looks so good out of the bullpen, it's like, let's keep him in the bullpen. So it is fair to bring up the point, hey, maybe the best course of action with David Peterson is for him to start game 5 if there is a game 5, as opposed to running the same act with Kodai Senga. Because the problem with the Senga game is that you need someone to back him up. You need to have another starting pitcher, whether it's David Peterson, whether it's Tyler McGill, whether you wanted to pull this crap with Jose Quintana or Luis Severino, to back him up. While if you start David Peterson, he could throw 7 innings. He could throw 6 innings. I think the problem with pulling the plug on Kodai is that they're not going to use him out of the bullpen. They've essentially said the only role he could have is making these kinds of starts. So I think they've put themselves in a spot with the way they constructed this roster by having Kodai Senga on it that, yeah, he's going to start game 5. It's just the way it is. They're not going to back off that. But it is compelling to think about David Peterson and say he deserves to make a start. Look, David Peterson didn't pitch well in this game. It was bound to happen. He was due to have it happen. What was impressive by Peterson is that when he did come in the middle of an inning facing Max Muncy with a guy on base, he actually did a good job and struck him out. But unfortunately, I get the point. I think they are very much committing to Kodai Senga coming back to start game 5. Ralph writes, I didn't expect the Mets to get beat like this, and like typical, we weren't ready to play. I was in agreement with you that we should have started Sean Manaea, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Well, what the hell's the blessing in disguise, by the way? What is the blessing? That they're going to win game 2? Because they weren't going to hit Jack Flaherty? Which is, it's a flawed thought to say, hey, if they had started Manaea and he pitched 7 scoreless innings, the Mets were going to face the exact same fate they had against Jack Flaherty today. I get why we think that, but it's a completely different game. Completely different. Just like if Jesse Winker successfully goes to third and there's first and third, nobody out, we can't assume Tyrone Taylor's swinging at the first pitch and hitting a fly ball to right field and assuming that Francisco Alvarez is swinging at the first pitch and Jack Flaherty's throwing the exact same pitches. You can't make that assumption. Everything's different. But anyhow, Ralph went on to write, also typical Jeff McNeil swinging at the first pitch. Come on. You can't do that after the pitcher was throwing balls. Yeah, McNeil came up in the 8th to pinch hit for Tyrone Taylor after Iglesias drew a walk, and he swung at the first pitch. Which, at that point, it's 6-0. So you're out of it, but you're still sort of in it. You need base runners. But that's not what Jeff McNeil does. Ralph goes on to write, also not sure how Mendy was managing this bullpen today. Just leave the guys in instead of burning everyone. I guess we have Tyler McGill. Quick turnaround in a must-win. I hate the Dodgers and Ohtani more. He's a douche. Yeah, it's easy to start disliking Shohei Ohtani. And a lot of the dislike for Shohei Ohtani has really nothing to do with him. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. It's the way he's talked about. It's the way he's treated. It's the graphic that reminds us Ohtani's 4 batters away. It's the fact that all of a sudden a potential scandal gets talked about by nobody, which does lead me to something I do want to talk about on the radio in a couple of days. When the Dodgers come to Citi Field, Shohei Ohtani needs to be verbally, and I want to do it classily, by the way, but the Met fan needs to go after Shohei Ohtani. They need to really try to get in his head. And the way I would do it, I have a chant in mind, by the way. The way I would do it is simply, where's your bookie? Where's your bookie? That's it. Nice and simple. We're not using F words, not cursing them out. We're just asking them a question. It's okay to ask a question. Where's your bookie? Steve Johnson writes, we now know the circle of trust. Close games can lead you to who's in the circle of trust, but so can the blowout games. The circle of trust is Edwin Diaz, Phil Maton, and Ryan Stanek because they weren't used tonight. I hope David Peterson can bounce back. We're going to need him to win this series. I still have confidence in this team. It's only the opener. You know, that was the other thing I thought about with going to Budo, that Mendy basically told us, I don't trust him anymore. He had a couple of down appearances in this postseason, and we've lost him. Got a lot of emails complaining about the use of Jose Budo, including KT, who writes, why would Mendy use Budo here? When you brought in Danny Young an inning earlier, you were essentially waving the white flag since the offense can't seem to do anything against Jack Flaherty, and now you waste Jose Budo? Now he can't pitch until Game 3. I don't understand why they chose to pitch Senga tonight, knowing that David Peterson was still on short rest. Chances were Senga could not go deep in the game and needed Peterson to pitch at length behind them. Or was the plan to use Tyler McGill to back up Kodai Senga? If that was the plan, why wasn't it McGill to come in out after Senga got pulled? I'm frustrated and confused. No, I don't think McGill was the plan. I think Peterson was the plan, just like Philadelphia. And I think the way Mendy probably had it all figured out was Senga gets through 2 innings. He faces 8 batters. Peterson comes in, and it's 8-9-1, and that's Gavin Lux, Tommy Edman, and Shohei Ohtani. And that's perfect. That's a perfect lane, if you will, for David Peterson. But you can draw that up as much as you want. It didn't work that way. And the other problem was, if you wanted that lane, which I think is a good one for David Peterson, you could have done it to start the second inning after Kodai Senga had a rocky first inning and faced 7 batters and gave up 2 runs and walked 3 guys. But he didn't do that. Frank writes, I didn't like Kodai Senga pitching Game 1, but really didn't matter who they pitched since nobody can hit. I would, however, not pitch Senga again if they get to that point. Start David Peterson, Phantom IL Senga. This game has the Mets burning their bullpen for no good reason and can trickle down as the series goes along. And look, Negative Dan brought it up. Why not start David Peterson over Kodai Senga? I don't think they're going to do it. Because I think when you do that, you've basically eliminated him from the series. You could Phantom IL him, even though the former GM got fired for Phantom ILs. So why not just whip it out in the middle of the league championship series? And by the way, here are the rules on that. And it's not the IL, it's literally removing a guy from the roster due to injury. You can do that. You lose him for this round and the following round. So if the Mets did that, he'd be done for the season, obviously. He'd be off the LCS roster and then would not be eligible to pitch in the World Series, which everybody's already giving up on. Darren Cohen didn't like the Budo decision. First, it's one game. I'm not going to freak out over losing a game. I was okay with Kodai Senga, even though it was a risk. The Mets have been pushing starters, and you could do this and give your big guys an extra day. Look at last year's innings for all of them. I thought going to Reed Garrett to David Peterson was smart. You're one swing away from being in the game, and then once it's the sixth, it made perfect sense to go to Danny Young. But Jose Budo? What? He can't do 2 straight days if history tells us anything, so why use him here? You have Tyler McGill down there if Young can't get pushed. It's the first of 4, not 1. Deep breath, Met fans. Of course, I'm sending this going into the 8th inning, so maybe I'll be a reason a miracle happens, but I doubt it. Yeah, there was no miracle. I think what we learned, though, is he doesn't trust Jose Budo. Jose Budo was in the circle of trust. I don't think he is anymore. And I think that's what we learned from Dave Roberts using him. Dave Roberts using him. Jesus. I'm thinking of Dave Roberts because I want to know officially what he's doing with his Game 2 starter, which I'll tell you in a second. I have the answer. But I think what Carlos Mendoza showed us was he doesn't trust Jose Budo. He's no longer in that circle of trust. So I guess the Dodgers have it still. Game 2 of the NLCS will be a bullpen game for the LA Dodgers. That is what Dave Roberts is confirming. So they'll go bullpen game. We saw them do that against the Padres in a game that they needed to win Game 4. They went bullpen game. That would line up Yamamoto and Walker Buehler, assuming neither guy is used. I don't think they will be. For games 3 and 4 back at Citi Field. So that what it means is they've got to win Game 2. They really do. Not that Yamamoto is unbeatable. Not that Walker Buehler is unbeatable, because they're clearly not. But I think when you see a bullpen game, as good as the Dodger bullpen is, you got to take advantage of it. When they had a bullpen game in Game 4 against San Diego, they started Ryan Brazier, the longtime relief pitcher, and he ended up getting 4 outs, pitched really well. They used Brazier. They used their one left-hander, Anthony Banda. He's the only lefty in their bullpen because Vesia got hurt at the end of Game 5. We talked about that a few days ago. They used Michael Kopech for an inning. In the previous bullpen game, they used Vesia, who's not available. He actually got the most outs in the game, got 5 outs. No one got more than 5 outs. They used Evan Phillips for 4 outs, Daniel Hudson for 3 outs, Blake Trinan for 3 outs, and then finally they used Landon Knack for the final 3 outs. Landon Knack was a starter during the regular season, so I guess he could pitch multiple innings if they wanted. So Dave Roberts is going bullpen game. Figure it's very similar. They made one change to their bullpen with Vesia off. They added Honeywell, another right-hander. So this is, they got to freaking win Game 2. Not giving up if they don't win Game 2, but they got to win Game 2. And what's painful for me selfishly, I think a lot of people have off. It is a holiday. We're doing our show from American Dream. You're more than welcome to stop by. It'll basically be a watch party / talking about everything else because the Mets are on at 4 o'clock. So I know with it being a holiday, it's probably good for a lot of people. They probably like it. I freaking hate it because it means I'm sitting there doing a sports talk radio show while the Mets are playing Game 2 of the NLCS. But you can join me if you so wish. I haven't decided how we're going to do the post-game Rico. There are 2 options. One option is to do the post-game Rico live from American Dream right after our radio show is over. Just pot up the Rico and we'll be good to go. So it could be a live studio audience Rico. The other option, since I do want to get home and watch the Jet game and the Yankees are playing an ALCS game, is to do a drive home Rico, just not from a game, a drive home Rico from the bar. Either way, there will be a Rico Brogna soon after they play Game 2 against the LA Dodgers. Bullpen game versus Sean Manaea. They've got to clean this crap up, and they got to play a lot better, and I think all of us will feel grand at 1-1 going back to Citi Field as compared to being down 0-2 going back to Citi Field. So we'll have a Rico right after the game. If you do want to hang out, we're going to be broadcasting our program from American Dream, the Dream Bar, where the game will be set up. It'll be a very exciting day. There's a lot to talk about. The quartet of sports insanity continues with the Giants playing a Sunday night game. They suffered a brutal loss. The Jets getting set for a huge Monday night against Buffalo. The Yankees getting set to start the ALCS against Cleveland. And obviously everything around the Mets, the lifeless game one loss, and a huge, monstrous, maybe series-defining game 2 with Sean Manaea taking on the Dodgers bullpen. We do appreciate you listening. We appreciate you downloading. We appreciate you staying up late for a depressing, but hey, it's the postseason, baby. This is what we live for. A depressing edition of Rico Brogna. We'll talk to you after.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.